And Senator Ron Johnson is on the Homeland Security and Foreign Relations Committee. He joins us. Good evening, sir. And as a member of those committees, were you aware of ISIS before in the last, 3 weeks? And if so, when did you become aware of ISIS?
Oh, let's face it, we heard that same testimony, or heard of it, by Brett McGurk back in November 2013. But this administration has been instated now for quite some time. I remember Secretary Kerry, when he came before our Foreign Relations Committee in September of 2013, when we were debating the authorization for use of military force in Syria, I asked him the question, because we'd heard reports that the rebels in Syria were being infiltrated by al-Qaeda, and I asked him if that was true, and he said, oh, no, that's not true, Senator. All the reports we have is the opposition is becoming more moderate. And so they were denying reality there, and of course we all know that President Obama, after ISIS took over Fallujah and parts of Ramadi, he basically referred to ISIS as the JV team, because he simply wanted to believe his own rhetoric, his own narrative that al-Qaeda was on the run, they decimated it, and the war on terror was over.
All right, I'm not going to defend the president. I'm calling it a JV. I'm not going to defend the president in the light of Fallujah getting run over in January or Mosul in June. But was he referring, when he used that overestimating or underestimating remark, was that in reference to the capability of the Iraqi army, or was that about the threat of ISIS?
Yeah, I imagine, he was probably referring to the stunning retreat, retreat of the Iraqi security forces, the way they just threw down their arms and changed out of their uniforms right away. I suppose everybody was surprised by just their total lack of resolve, but even there we shouldn't have been surprised by that, because when we pulled out of Iraq in 2011, when we bugged out and we didn't leave a stabilizing force, Greta, it was the U.S. military that was the glue that held that coalition together. The only way that Sunni and Shia were going to trust each other is if they were given the time by having an American presence there. And so we lost all influence. That coalition basically was busted up at that point in time. So we shouldn't have been surprised at all that the Iraqi military force was totally depleted of the professional military staff that the Sunnis provided.
Senator, there's a lot of attention tonight on Ebola here in this country. That's, of course, grabbed a lot of our attentions. In some ways, it sort of shifts it off, at least for a few minutes, from what's going on with ISIS. But so tell me, why should the American people, why should your constituents in Wisconsin be really concerned about ISIS tonight?
Well, because by the testimony of the same Brett McGurk in front of our committee just this last July, talked about how ISIS was funneling 30 to 50 suicide bombers. The way they've been recruiting successfully off the internet, they are recruiting foreign jihadists with Western and American passports. It would be a pretty easy task for ISIS to start funneling those suicide bombers into the West, into America. And of course, we saw the first American suicide bomber in Syria fly back to Florida before he flew back to Syria to blow himself up this May. So this is definitely a clear and present danger to America.
Is President Obama to be blamed, I hate to use that word, but to be blamed for being asleep at the wheel as we see ISIS grow so dramatically in the last few months, to the point where we've got this situation where we're worried about lone wolves, we're worried about the expansion in Iraq and Syria. We've even seen 2 American journalists get beheaded. But is that because President Obama was asleep at the wheel and didn't move earlier?
Well, the biggest blunder was not leaving a stabilizing force behind in Iraq, just bugging out of Iraq, not giving that coalition government the time it needed to develop the trust between those coalition partners. So that was the biggest mistake. But no, you have to admit that this administration has been denying reality. They have not been watching this carefully. They haven't been taking the strong and resolute action around the world that we need in order to maintain peace.
Senator, thank you, sir.
Have a great night.
And people in the